Hi, guys. I wanted to share with you some really exciting information about a new project that I'm involved with. It is a appointment to a charity board, a service board. It is the PADS of Elgin. This is an organization that serves the unhoused community in northern Kane County. And yesterday, I attended my first board meeting as a board member. I've got a really interesting story about how I got involved with Pads of Elgin as a board member. In the fall, there was an open house at one of the mosques that I attend here in Kane County. It's the ICC in Elgin, Illinois. And we were hosting an open house, and I had volunteered to come in and be a greeter at the front entrance. And as I was standing there greeting people from the community who were coming by for this mosque open house, one of my good friends from the Elgin community, Katie Shaw Thompson, was walking in. I knew Katie from the community and the various interfaith activities that she's involved in, that I was involved in. And I knew that she had recently joined Pads of Elgin as their executive director. So I asked her how things were going, and she was very candid. She said, well, things are very difficult at Pads of Elgin. They had told me that they had lost a very significant amount of funding from government sources. And it got me to thinking, what can I do to help? And as some of you know, my family, has been involved in doing our very small part in addressing the unhoused crisis in our communities for a long time. We volunteer with Shy Care, a charity that brings hot food to the unhoused in various parts of the city of Chicago. In the different mosques that we've been involved with, we have provided food for various shelters in our communities. And so very, very small things and given small amounts of money for charity efforts and to help as well. But I wanted to see if there was something else that could be done. So I went to their website. I looked at their annual reports, and one thing that struck me was they list their donors, and that's not what struck me. But what struck me was that I looked through there, and this is a local charity. I did not see very many names of people that I knew. So I thought, well, one thing is clear. There is an entire universe of good people that Pads of Elgin hasn't reached or hasn't reached effectively, and that would be very generous in supporting an organization like this if they knew what good works they were doing. So I decided to reach out to Katie and I said, Katie, I think I can be helpful. And I think the way I can be helpful is to try to help amplify the message of the work that the folks at Pads of Elgin are doing to a group of people that maybe the organization currently isn't reaching. And so we sat down, we talked, and then I filled out an application and had an interview with the existing board. And I told them who I was and what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. And they agreed to invite me to join the board. I want to share an interesting couple stories. One of the things that Katie asked me is, well, what is it that draws me to this particular issue? And I explained to her that while I have never suffered or experienced being unhoused or homeless, I'm very mindful of what that might feel like. And that's for a couple reasons. As an adult, I worked in the city of Chicago most of my career. I was a public defender for the early part of my career, and there were a big percentage of my clients were either chronically or acutely unhoused, and that contributed to a lot of the challenges and the problems that they were experiencing. Just working in the city, you're getting off the train, you're walking to work, you're leaving your building, you're going to lunch, you're leaving office to go back to the train, and you can't help but encounter people who are unhoused. And so that's just a part of life if you are working in an urban area, sadly. So that's been part of my experience. But then when I was in the suburbs in the morning on my way to work, stopping to get a cup of coffee at a McDonald's, I remember this really distinctly. I pulled into the McDonald's. It was early in the morning. It was in, the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And I don't like going through the drive-through, so I walked in and as I parked my car, the car next to me was full of stuff. It looked like somebody was moving, and the car was jam-packed with bags of clothes and wrappers and things like that, a car seat. And I walked in, and it was about 6:30 in the morning. And I walked in, and I saw a man and a woman and two little kids. And the kids had like their backpacks, and and the two little kids were eating, and the what I presume were the mom and dad were just watching them and just helping them as they ate their breakfast. And I realized that what I might be seeing is a case of a family that was unhoused, maybe living out of their car, and they were at this McDonald's getting food for their kids and then probably taking them to school after that. And I knew that that was a possibility because I'd served on a school board. And it blows me away that even in this affluent community that we live in, there is a percentage of students who are either acutely or chronically unhoused. And so I realized that, wow, this problem doesn't just limit itself to urban areas. It hits home right here in this pretty affluent community that I'm a part of as well. And then the last story that I'll share with you is that really makes the issue of being unhoused really resonate with me is, okay, I've never been unhoused, but I've seen what, not having a home can do to your life as having been a public defender representing people in the criminal justice system and the abuse and neglect system. I've seen it in the streets walking to and from work, and I've seen it in schools, and I've seen it in my community, just seeing people living out of their cars in communities where you wouldn't think that there were people that didn't have a place to live. Then I had this experience where my mom and dad were downsizing, and so they were cleaning out their house, the house that we grew up in. And they gave me a bunch of stuff from my childhood. And in that stuff, there were composites, the photos that you take when you're in grammar school of your classmates and your teachers, and you get it at the end of the year. So there were a bunch of those in the, box of stuff that my mom gave me. And as I was looking through it, I saw something that had never really occurred to me up until this moment, maybe like 10 years ago. There were five composites between the grades kindergarten through fourth grade. And that really blew me away. I said, wow, we moved around a lot in those first few years that we came to America from India. I was 4 years old. And, as a result, I was going from one school to another from kindergarten through the fourth grade. The fourth grade, I did kindergarten at, or I did fourth grade at two different grammar schools. And then I remembered, well, yeah, I look at the family pictures from then, and we'd be in this apartment this year, and this apartment that year, and we'd be living in a relative's home, for a while here, and another relative's home for a while here, and then even when we had our own home, there would be other immigrant family members living in our home with us. And that was a scenario that, continued all the way through when I was in high school. And it occurred to me that, but for, unearned grace, that homeless situation, that unhoused situation could have been our plight. Because what separated me and my mother and father and my family from any of these families that are suffering being unhoused today? Unearned grace. It's just luck of the draw. We just happen to have family members who were able to put us up and allow us to live with them for the periods of time where my parents needed it. But for that, we would not have had a place to stay either. And so that really brings it home that this idea of people not having a place to live being the result of their bad deeds or their bad character is just not true. Even when it comes to the various issues that are concurrent with being unhoused, it's not because of this, then this. It's a confluence of different circumstances like that creates a crisis. And you can't necessarily say that, somebody's decision on point A is what resulted in their losing their housing. That, it could be a combination of things that they had very little control over, their personal illness only being one small factor in that. So I guess what that made me realize is that in this country where we have so much wealth, we should not have this as a problem. There are many other issues that we need to tackle, but a lack of affordable housing for all people is one issue that we should be able to solve. And yet we have not been able to do that. So I have joined this board to try to see, how I can help fund the mission that they are proceeding to advance, which is to help families and individuals solve their unhoused crisis and, put them into a situation that is sustainable and that takes them out of the vicious cycle of being unhoused and puts them in a position of stability where they can improve their lives and live a life of dignity. So that's why I've joined Pads of Elgin to try to do my small part to contribute to this very important mission. And I want to ask you, my many friends and colleagues out there, to consider at this end of the calendar year 2025, if you've got some money left over that you'd like to contribute to a charitable cause. I think that contributing to addressing the unhoused crisis in the United States would be a very noble and worthy way of giving your hard-earned money to something worthwhile. And I would like to encourage you to consider making your contribution to the Pads of Elgin. And I'm going to put the information on where to contribute elsewhere in this post. But please try to check out the information about this organization and make your contribution before the end of the year so that number one, you can fund good work, and number two, you can feel good that you used the blessings that God has bestowed upon you and me in a way that goes beyond just our material happiness and really helps to support other people who are in need and who, but for the grace of God, could we could be suffering the same challenges or issues that they're suffering and facing today. So thanks very much for listening to this, and I hope you have very happy holidays. And please, again, consider making a contribution to the Pads of Elgin before the end of the year.